Okay, welcome divas and dudes to our nutrition class for the day here at Powerhouse Bakery. Thank you for being here. We are continuing our adventures in creating a Buddha bowl. So just as a quick reminder, the whole goal of a Buddha bowl is to have wonderful flavors that have their own personality, that have good balanced nutrition, that have some interest and intrigue, also that have some protein, some complex carbohydrates, maybe even a good variety of flavors, and maybe even some new surprising foods. So what I want to do today is share with you some really fun ways that vegans have been jazzing up their protein for a long time, and it is a fermented tofu. So we've talked a little bit about fermentation. If you guys were a part of the class where we talked about the gut biome and how do we really want to help the biome, well, prebiotics are an example of fruits and vegetables that we eat, and those oligosaccharides or carbohydrates are digested at different rates. And so those prebiotics leave some of those good sugars behind to help the bacteria prosper or flourish in our gut. We've heard of probiotics, and probiotics are ones that have already been sort of turned into bacteria that we consume. So yogurt is a very common one. And we let the bacteria ferment so that hopefully the natural flora of the environment then becomes part of our internal environment and helps our intestine be healthy. I've never been a big fan of taking probiotics just as a prophylactic, insurance, because so often we don't know what kind of stuff we have going on in our tummy, bacteria, healthy bacteria, and what kind is going to be in that pill or in that potion. So really what I like to show here is how do we use things that are naturally fermented. So there you are with the yogurt idea. And even taking that Fulbright would be to make your own yogurt. Anybody do that? I know some of you do. Yes. So then you're actually using the natural bacteria in the environment. So the idea there is it helps your body because it's building your biome to support the antibodies against those bacteria in the environment. So now we're going to turn towards something that has been fermented for us, so kind of like yogurt. And I was watching videos this morning on how to make your own tofu and your own tempeh. Okay, well, I'm not quite there yet. Maybe I will, but I'm really in the mode still of learning how to use this interesting product. And so today I want to experiment with you. The reason why it's valuable, it's fermented. So the idea is that the fermentation process gives us some healthy bacteria. And when the soy product is fermented, it's actually breaking down some of the proteins, the amino acids, and making them easier for our bodies to digest. So that's a big benefit of fermentation, is it makes it easier to get the nutrition out of the product. So you know me, I love edamame. That's where I'm most comfortable. It's the little bean. Now, some experts would say the edamame has some non-nutrients. And again, I'm not sure how far I want to go down that path, a non-nutrient from a bean. But the idea is that when you ferment it, it breaks down some of those lectins or some of those other chemicals, and it improves the digestibility of the amino acids. So easier to digest the amino acids, and it also decreases some of the non-nutrients. And so those, again, are really just maybe barriers to being able to absorb the nutrients. So we've heard of spinach having phytates that prevent the body from absorbing some of the iron. So that's kind of what we talk about with the non-nutrient. It's a nutrient, or it's a chemical in the food that causes a barrier to our bodies being able to absorb the nutrients really that are part of that food. So fermentation, is an interesting way to go. So no, it's not in a pill or a potion. It's not really from our environment because we didn't make this. But the idea is it's close. It's similar. It's not trying to put a bunch of bacteria into something. But when we get ready to open this, and I'm going to pass these around, you can see that there are some dark edges. And there is some interesting stuff in this. Now, funny story, while I was doing my research, I bought one of these and I looked at it when I got home and I thought, oh, shoot, this one went bad. It's got mold on it. And so I promptly returned it to H-E-B and said, I don't want that one. I want a new one. And then I'm going to pass it around. As I did my research, the guys on YouTube and the other chefs go, now don't worry if it has some weird colors on it because that's just merely the healthy bacteria doing its thing. And so then I was a little embarrassed that I marched back to H-E-B and said that my tempeh was rotten. So don't be afraid of it. Now, some people will still be kind of freaked out and cut it off. And, this is where we just have to get used to the idea. Anybody buy yogurt and when it sits there and it develops the whey on top and you pour it out because you think that must be wrong? It's like, no, don't do that. Stir it up. Exactly, Rachel, because that's good for us too. There's no reason to pour it off. But again, it's just kind of foreign to us. And tempeh has originated, I believe, in Indonesia. So, people groups that don't have a lot of, we'll say HEBs around, they get very resourceful. And so the soy plant is not only easy to grow, but there's so many uses for soy. Here in the US, most of the soy that we grow, where do you think it goes? Not to the vegan platters. It feeds our animals. So our animals are benefiting from all the protein that occurs in soy. Now, I'm not going to say they feed them tempeh from Light Life, but, soy itself is a really nutritious food. And that's why I want us to learn about it. We know that, there's some ways to make it easier to digest. Of course, we need to learn how to season it. We need to spice it up. Now, the other thing about tofu that I think is important for us to talk about is the benefits of soy. Because, we still have some fears around foods that are high in estrogens. So I know I've talked about this, so most of you have probably heard it, so I'll just give it a quick little review. And that is that plants that have estrogens, phytoestrogens, are going to have some good qualities because just like they protect the plants, they are meant to protect from bacteria, from environmental toxins. So it's a protection. Also, when our body is making estrogen and we are cancer survivors and we are trying to decrease the amount of estrogen in our body, why would we want to take a plant that has estrogen? The answer is that our body's estrogen is much more potent. And the plant estrogen is very, very weak. But it is still strong enough to bind to the receptor sites so that then our body, our hypothalamus says, oh, cool, we don't need to make more estrogen. Those receptor sites are happy because they've been bound. It's not a strong binding. It's not, of course, going to have the same negative effects of estrogen because it's so weak. But that means that we can safely consume soy products, knowing that it's not going to be a growth factor for cancer-causing cells, and it's going to help our body to reduce the amount of estrogen that our body makes. So if you're on a estrogen-lowering medicine, having phytoestrogens is a good thing. There's excellent research out there that looks at flaxseed, which is kind of the mother lode of phytoestrogens. And we've seen that if you're taking an estrogen blocker and you're eating flaxseed, you're actually getting a benefit to what that medicine is trying to do. So to me, that seems like a win-win, right? And so if we can learn how to spice it up and learn to love it, then we want to try to add to our day, because we know it's going to be a great source of nutrients. The clincher is, can we learn to cook it and love it and really make it something that we can sprinkle in everywhere. So that's what I'm going to try to do for us today. And before we start to cook, I do want to look at the label for you. Is that one passing around? I think I can pass a couple more around so you can see them and look at it with me. So I've passed around the regular ones. So first I want you to see the mycelium. So if you flip it over, it's got some of them have more than others. It's kind of a white film that you see around it. That's in fact the mold, so don't be afraid of that. The mold can also be a kind of a medium brown color, which is again why I returned it. This one's got a couple of those spots. You can see some of the veins. So really what tempeh is the soybean that has been cooked and fermented. So the way they ferment it is after they cook it, they put it in just the right temperature, and they give it a little bit of medium in which to grow, and the healthy bacteria develops. But if you look at the nutrition information, in a third of this block, so we're looking at maybe about this size of a piece, that's the nutritional facts that I'm going to read you. It gives us 7 grams of fat, 1 gram of that is saturated, 10 grams of carbs, 4 dietary fiber. So if you were, really counting carbs, could you take away the fiber and count the net carbs? Sure. But if you're eating a more plant-based diet, it is always going to be fine just to eat a lot of plants and not even worry about trying to subtract the fiber, because you're in a win-win. But if you're fat counting that, you can subtract the fiber, which means you have a total net carbs of 6, pretty low. Anybody remember how many grams of carbohydrates we women need in about a day? Like around 200, so that's really small, right? Total sugars is 2. And everybody asks me, okay, where do the sugars come from? We look at the ingredients and there is no sugar added. Now, maybe there was some sugars added to the growth of the fermentation process. But remember, the sugars can be very erroneous on labels, because sometimes when they're measuring the carbohydrates, the first carbohydrates that are burned off are so early on in the process that they count them as sugars. When really, we've learned that carbohydrates are all going to give sugars, right? So it all goes into the same bucket. So unless you see there's added sugar to the product, I want you to disregard sugars in the label or in the nutrition facts, because it's very erroneous. And then we go to protein. 17 grams of protein in this little piece. Pretty impressive. So those of us that want to make sure we're eating plant-based and want to make sure we're getting enough protein, this is going to really help us meet that requirement. So I think it's a great reason to try it. Now, last week, you looked at tofu. So how do these compare? So nutritionally, in about the same amount, so 3 ounces, this is giving us 9 protein. And this one is giving us double, so almost double, 17. So it is a drier product. So I'm going to show you how to soften it up so it will absorb the flavors a little better. But I'm also going to let you try the texture comparison so you can kind of see, which one appeals to you more. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to prepare the tempeh so you can see which one kind of appeals to you. But just know that they're both excellent. There's ways to really get rid of a lot of the moisture. You always want to look for extra firm because that is going to have the higher protein content, unless you know you're going to blenderize it. So if you were going to use this as a base for a dip, well, you could get the silken tofu. It's just going to blend easier. Basically, it means there's more water in it. But the extra firm has already taken out some of the water. When I open this, I'm going to pour out that water and squeeze it out with some paper towels, and it does great, okay? And so then in regular form of our beautiful Buddha bowl, I looked in our fridge to see what kinds of goodies I want to build the Buddha bowl with. So I went to the store as well, and I got some beautiful fresh little broccolinis. When I prepare the tempeh, I am going to boil it first. I'm going to slice it and boil it. You don't have to do that, but I want you to see the extra step and the difference that it does. Makes it a little tender, which I think is a good thing because, again, we're not used to this texture. So it gives it a little more tenderness, and it helps the marinade to be absorbed better. So I think that's a win-win. So whenever we think of recipes with the tofu and the tempeh, they're going to have similar flavors. Again, tofu and tempeh are really a blank slate. It's really flavorless. And so if you've ever tried, which I'm one of them, I tried cooking this right out of the package and I was very disappointed. It tastes pretty bland. It almost has a little bitterness to it. So we got to make sure that we know the steps in preparing. So steps to season. And this is what I'm going to show you today so you can kind of get an idea. Again, the soaking, if it's going to be the tempeh, if it's tofu, you're going to want to squeeze out the extra moisture. Because, again, if we take out the moisture, it'll be able to absorb our flavors better. Now for the most important, layer the flavors. We need lots of flavor. So I gave you a couple of recipes, and I've shown you a couple of the ingredients on here. So I've got some of my favorites. Now, a lot of these are ingredients that are in my adobo spice and also my quinoa spice. So I could have just used that, which is what I normally do. But I wanted you to see all the specific spices that I'm adding so that you can make your own. You can leave out a flavor that you don't like, perhaps. But I think it's important to see that we got to flavor it because otherwise it will be very disappointing. So I've got sage, paprika. I've got adobo or ancho. And then I've also got the fennel and garlic. There we are. So you could use fresh garlic. Last week you saw a marinade that I used with the Bragg's as well as fresh garlic, and you could use fresh ginger. And so really the sky's the limit on the flavors because once you get going, you'll see what ones you kind of like, but we're going to layer the flavors. So you want to have a dry spice layer and you want to have a wet. So a marinade, liquidy. So some vinegar, some Bragg's, which I'm going to bring out in just a second. Marinade. And then a little bit of patience too, because plan to let it sit for at least 2 hours. Even better overnight. Because the more it absorbs, the better it'll be, and so the recipe that I gave you, think about, just buying some of this, and you could even, I forgot this tip, you can squeeze this out, all the moisture that you can, and then freeze it, and that helps get the moisture out even more, and it gives it a little bit more of a heartier texture. So let me put that in as a bonus. Freeze tofu or the tempeh before using. Freeze and then thaw. This was freeze them in the packages as they are? No, I would take it out. You could, I guess, freeze it and all, but the whole idea is you want the liquid to be less and less. So what I did was I took it out of the container. It's got all that liquid in there. I drain it. I put it in some paper towels, squeeze it, put it back in an airtight container and freeze it. And then it's got an even better texture. So I think it's worth that step. If you forget that or you really want to use it right away, of course you can. You'll just see a slight difference in the texture. Speaking of which, this one is already seasoned. I'm not usually a fan of already seasoned because we don't know what their flavors are. And if this is your first experience, you might never go back because you might not like the flavors they've added, right? So it's called Tempeh Buffalo. It still has the same amount of protein. It's got some nice dark edges. It's mold, it's good. I have to keep reminding myself. But let's see what the flavors are like that they've mentioned. It says, we are committed to sharing our love for plant-based foods, leading to a balanced life. Tempeh strips are marinated to be mildly spicy, savory, and nutty. Okay, that's not telling us a whole lot. Now I'm going to look at the ingredients, and it's a long list. which again always makes me worry, but let's read through them just in case. Tempeh, which is the soybeans and water, and it has organic brown rice added to this. The buffalo sauce is organic red peppers, distilled vinegar, sunflower, salt, canola, cayenne pepper, dehydrated pureed peppers. So, it might not be bad. And so we're going to try it today, and we'll get your opinion and see what you think. Okay? Any questions before we start cooking? All right, let's experiment with the kitchen. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is get my skillet heated, and I'm going to add some water because I'm going to open up my tempeh and do the little boiling technique. So it doesn't need much, like maybe a half an inch or so. And I'm going to use this water again. With my beautiful broccolini, I'm going to do a quick steam, and that way it'll be really nice to add to my Buddha bowl. Okay, so let's open this baby up. I'm going to start with the, I'm going to start with this one. This is the plain one. And so I want you to see what the insides looks like. It's got 2 wrappers. And so it makes you work to get it out. It is USDA. So, it's really trying to be a healthy product. It's got the non-GMO labeling. Yeah, I told you it makes you work. Once it gets the fermentation, they don't want it to grow too much. There we go. I finally got it loose. But see, there's like a double wrapper. And it's quite dry. Look, it kind of crumbled. But that's okay. So it almost looks like, almost like corn kernels. But it's pretty dry to the touch, unlike the tofu. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice it. And this is how I made this dish. So this is we call it Tempeh Bacon. And in a minute here, I'm going to pass it around and let you sample a little bit. But it's pretty tasty. And of course, it all depends on what kind of flavors you're adding to it. So I'm going to cut it in fairly thin strips. Maybe about, maybe a half an inch, quarter of an inch. The thinner they are, of course, the faster they'll absorb your marinade. So that's always a good thing. Okay, and I'm going to lay it in. My water's already boiling. So it doesn't make a lot. I think what I'll do is go ahead and do the flavored one too. And this one we don't really need to boil, but I want to open it up and I'll pan fry it after I do the broccolini. But I want you to kind of see the difference in the textures. Oh, look at that. They've already sliced it and everything. This one feels weird. It's a little slimy. But, I think it's worth experimenting. It's kind of fun just to see what other cultures use as a regular protein. So there it is. It's going to take about, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And that'll give me just enough time to mix the marinade. So when I do the marinade, I'm going to show you the simple ingredients. I'm going to start with this one, and this is going to give us a ready-made version. The one that I've already made is your recipe that you have in front of you. So we can mix the marinade, and it has the Bragg's, it has a little bit of maple syrup, and then all these spices. And then, of course, I love adding my CD blend. Or we can use a bottled version of your favorite barbecue or marinade or splash. And it just gives it another variation. So I'm going to just pour it in here. One thing I like about this particular one is it's going to allow it to be kind of sticky. So this mango coconut tequila sauce sounds fun, right? It's going to help my seeds to stick to it really nicely. So that's why I picked it. So this is looking good. And again, there's nothing to really look for. We're just kind of opening up the tempeh a little bit with the boiling water. So yeah, that looks, I'm just flipping over each piece. Looks excellent. And I'm going to chop up my basil. So once I get my tempeh into the marinade. I'm going to put some basil in it. I want to give it a little more flavor. Remember the layers of flavor. And then lastly will be the seeds. So I got the bottled marinade. I've got my seeds and my herbs. So that's my extra. And then I can either fry it in the skillet or I can put it in the oven, and then it'll look more like this, where it's kind of browned on the top. And I'm not putting in any oil. So it's kind of fun too that it can be a really low calorie version. Mainly it's protein. It's got a little bit of carbohydrates, and that's it. So from the skillet, I'm going to put it right into my yummy sauce. Beautiful. There we have it. Okay, so I'm going to put a little more of the sauce right on top. Douse them in there a little bit. Okay. And now, while I'm getting this ready, I'm going to multitask. We women are the best. Sorry, dudes. But we all know that if we're going to multitask, women are the best. So while I have this water here, I wanted to get my broccolini going. Honestly, I'm not a fan of the tips. I mean, of the ends. I really just like the tips. So I'm going to do that. And you've seen me do asparagus like this, where it's just a small amount of water. Look, now this one's starting to bloom, which might end up making it a little bit bitter, but it sure is pretty. Anybody growing broccoli in their garden? No? Yes? Oh, I'm impressed though. Oh, don't you hate that? The worms have to eat too, you know? All right, I'm going to go ahead and put some of the stems in because they deserve a chance. And, you know, we don't have to put all of these in, but I really love having this as an option. And of course, I'm going to steam both sides. It's kind of a wet saute, I call it, because it's kind of a cross between a steam and a saute. We got water in there, no oil, and I am going to add some flavors to the top. Once I get them flipped over, and my water is just the perfect amount, just enough to barely cover the top. And I'm going to add a little bit of my seeds right to the floret so it'll hold all that flavor in there. And a little bit of garlic. All right, beautiful. Now, we're going to get the rest of our Buddha bowl items ready. It's probably going to take another minute or two for those to cook up. And here is the start of my Buddha bowl. So I had some beautiful quinoa already made. And Mary Tom, would you get the greens for me? I put in the fridge. I just forgot to bring them out. They're in a clear square tub. Thank you, ma'am. So now I want to add some color. So this is going to be part of my color. And then the greens. And I found these beautiful radish. I'm going to use them as well. You know, Powerhouse has not used radish very much. It dawned on me as we were making the summer menu. And radishes are a great high vitamin C food. So I have this beautiful glass dish, so I'm going to kind of put them around the edge. And I've got some guacamole that is already mixed. So I'm going to add that to my Buddha bowl as well. So remember, when we build this Buddha, we want to have some complex carbs, some greens, and some protein. We could always top it off with some extra nuts or dried fruit. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, my broccolini is ready. Thank you so much. That's perfect. All right. So here comes here's my layers of flavor for my Buddha. Put this greens off to the side. Now in this mix, I've added some basil as well, and it's got some beautiful mixed greens. So this is easy to buy. You can get whichever one really tickles your fancy. Okay, I think my beautiful veggies are ready. I'm going to pull them off and put them right beside my beautiful bacon tempeh. let them cool just for a minute, and then I'll add them to my salad. Because remember, it's also fun to have temperature variation in that Buddha bowl. So some crunchy, I could add some vinegar or some Suzette dressing or even some ginger lime to that beautiful green. Or just leave them plain with a little bit of salt. You know, sometimes it's fun just to have the natural flavors. I'm going to leave that little bit of liquid in there because, of course, we want to cook our next one. And I don't think that's going to hurt a bit. Again, this one's been already marinated, so it is softer. And with that little bit of liquid in there, it'll probably keep it moist. So I like that idea. Okay, let's put our basil into our tempeh. So layers of flavors. I picked basil because this is kind of a sweet sauce. So I kind of wanted to go with that theme. Right in there. And then some more basil into my salad mix. You could also use mint. That's one of my favorite things to add to salads. And mint grows, gosh, year-round. Anybody have mint growing? Yes, lots of hands. I have it on my walkway, and I just love it because every time I walk past, I just get this wonderful little hint of mint. All right, beautiful. I'm going to put those around here. A little bit more in there and in there. All right, so now we've got this beautiful seasoned tempeh, and I'm flipping it over. I like that my pan is now dry. Flip over each piece. So there's really nothing wrong with eating it raw. I mean, you don't have to cook it. It's not going to hurt you. I just think that we're always looking for a way to crisp up the edges, give it a little more flavor, and, you know, it just makes it a fun variation that we can always add sauces. And, you know, again, the temperature makes a difference. When you sample this one, I want you to get to see the difference between the softness and a little bit rougher texture when it's been fermented. I'm going to add a little bit of water just to help this cook. There we go. And again, I have no idea what buffalo tastes like, so we're going to get to sample that. Can you smell it though? It does have a hint of barbecue in there. Now that's looking beautiful. A lot of the videos that I was watching, once you get good at this, making your own tempeh is not hard. You could even start with the tofu, and you basically dry it out, get just the right temperature. So you might need an oven that will get to 100, I think it's 110 degrees for that fermentation process to really happen. But yeah, that's looking really pretty. So see there, that one is. So I'm going to now put this on our plate. I'm going to put it in a separate platter so you can see all the different ones. So see, it's not as crispy looking as mine, but I think it'll be an interesting one. We might decide if we want to add the seeds on top at the end. One thing that I was reading that sounds really good is to use this in a breakfast burrito. You know, here we're doing it as a Buddha bowl, but there's no reason why we couldn't add it to a scramble. We could do so many other variations with it. In the strips, though, it just makes it easier to serve and to cook. So there is that one that's already pre-seasoned. Now we're going to put this one in that we did a quick little marinade. Again, it's the bottled dressing. And when this one's cooking, I'm going to show you how to squeeze the other one and make it a crumble. I'm just going to let the basil sit right on top. And it's going to brown, but that's okay. I think it's going to be just fine. You could certainly add a little sesame oil to your skillet. That would be fun too. I'm trying to do no oil just to see, you know, our cooking technique will vary. But it saves your fat calories for the avocado that we're going to put on at the end. I'm going to get all that good sauce in there. I want you to see how pretty that looks in the skillet. So it's good color. It's got just the right amount of moisture in the skillet. I'm going to crank it up so I can get a little bit of browning agent of that sweet sauce. So I've brought it up pretty high. It's at 9.5. So while that's cooking, now I'm going to show you how to crumble it up using our hands. And I'm just going to put it right into that little bit of marinade that's left. And we're going to season this baby up very similar to these items. So I'm going to use these spices and kind of create our own crumble. Now the recipe I gave you, again, is easy to adjust. You don't have to do exactly what I have on your recipe. Looks like I need to sharpen my knives. Whew. All right, there we go. So notice that it's very crumbly. Easy to make into little pieces. There we go. So you can see when I start to crumble it, it really does look like just little pieces of the edamame bean that has been fermented. Oh, and you can see here, there's some good of the mycelium, the mold. That's good for us. I keep trying to remind myself. It's good. It's good. Don't be scared. Look to the light. Okay. So now it's crumbled. I know, right? Now it's crumbled. Ooh, and I got to check this. Look how pretty. I'm shaking it a little bit to get some of that beautiful silky sauce that's being created on the bottom of my skillet. Oh, yeah. Getting a nice little brown. So again, hot skillet is really valuable. I remember when we were doing the shashuka, I know you had our wonderful Brenda last week, and she's like, no, not too high, it'll burn. It's like, burn, baby, burn. It's not going to hurt it. You get all those beautiful colors this way. So look how pretty. It gets nice and brown. That little bit of basil gives it a little color. That up next to our radishes, it's going to be so gourmet. Okay, so now back to our crumble. I am going to add some flavor. So here's our fennel. That's one of my favorites, and it really makes me think of sausage. So I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of fennel. Half a teaspoon of garlic. Now, sage is one of my absolute favorite spices. And notice in this one, it's rubbed sage. So it's big pieces. I don't care for the powdered sage. That's just personal. But I just feel like this gives so much more aroma and so much texture to work with. So about a half a teaspoon of that. I hate to put that back in, so I'm just going to put it on there. And ancho chili. About a half a teaspoon. I like the little kick that the ancho gives. It's a soft, smoky pepper, so it's not one that's really hot. Honestly, I rarely use cayenne pepper because it's so hot. I'd much rather go with chipotle or this adobo or ancho. Yes, there we go. This is smoked paprika. It's going to give it some great color. It doesn't want to come out of there, does it? There it goes. Perfect. All right. Transition. Let's see how this baby's doing. Oh, yes. Look at that. Really, for things to be appealing, we've got to have that little brown edge, right? Looks just gorgeous. So that's going to be one more for us to try. And I think I'm going to go ahead and take it out right now. So this one is the pre-seasoned one. This is the one that I use, the jarred sauce. Ooh, I just love that. See, so is it looking a little more intriguing? Like maybe you could try it? Mary Jonas is the real test because she's like, I'm not eating that stuff. Oh, Mary Jonas. She's like, oh no, I'm not eating that. I called her a chicken. Okay, so now I'm just going to clear off some of that moisture from the bottom of my skillet. some of that stickiness I'm just turning into a little bit of moisture. I'm gonna let that burn off just a little bit as I critique my crumble. Now I could add some Bragg's to this. I could add a little bit of rice vinegar. I could add a little bit of sesame oil. So all of those are absolutely legal, you know, to mix into this. But I wanted to start with the dry and build from there. So I've got my marinade ready to go, and I could always add that in too. But this could be used as a taco filling. It could be as a scramble with a breakfast taco instead of egg, and you're getting all this protein. So I'm really excited to see how you guys like it and see if it's something you think you could incorporate into a healthy routine. I think it's just about ready. Okay, I want to show you how much liquid is in there because I think this is perfect. So it's about, I don't know, maybe 2 tablespoons. And I've got a little bit of the pan drippings from my other tempeh, and so it's going to cook it really nicely. I think on your recipe I said that you cook this with a little bit of water, especially if you have only used a dry rub. There we go. So now I'm just going to spread it around the skillet. I think what also would be really nice in this is maybe a mango salsa to serve in our Buddha bowl. We could do some just fresh mango, maybe even some grilled pineapple. Would go so well in this little menagerie. So I'm loving that. And while that's cooking, I'm going to show you the, oh no, I guess we didn't get. You can buy these that are, they have flax seeds in them. And I kind of deselect that one because the flax seeds actually don't help the flavor. I'd much rather you put the flax seed on at the end and grind them up. I thought I brought one, but I didn't. They have the whole seeds in here. And so you remember when flax seeds are whole, our bodies can't really do much with it. It actually has to be ground up for us to get all of the essential fats. You still get some of the lignans, the fibers, but you don't get nearly as much of the good stuff. Okay, ooh, this is looking great. So see, it's got plenty of moisture in the skillet. If you don't already have some Bragg's, like a cocoa aminos is another one, definitely get some because I think it really is fun to use in these applications. Get some of that out of there. Now I'm going to chop up some green onion and add that to my dish. The green onion will just add some wonderful freshness, and I've already got my basil. So when you're using green onion, you might as well get gourmet and cut on the angle. Yes, and I'm doing it towards the end of the cooking. So just like the basil, it'll still have some really fresh edges. Doesn't that look pretty? So I'm going to give it another minute or so, and then I'm going to add our beautiful guacamole. Yes. I think I might even add a little bit of my marinade. So this is the same spices. It just has a little bit of the Bragg's and a little bit of the maple syrup. So just give it a little extra flavor. And you can definitely reuse these marinades. You know, they're not expensive, of course, but your spices, you hate to throw this out. And so I always keep them in my little plastic container. The tofu will sit in it for maybe overnight. It'll absorb some of it. And then, heck, use it again. If you're short on time, another trick is to press the tofu really into the marinade more. I'm going to show you this one because that's just about ready. Notice now again on the tofu, there's a lot more liquid. So I'm going to pour that out. And again, if you have paper towels, you can just squeeze all the liquid out. But it's a very easy to work with square. So if I had paper towels, I would just wrap it around it, squeeze all the moisture out, and it's a great way to then freeze it. It's ready to go. The other thing too is when you're doing your marinade, slice it or cube it, and then press it into the marinade, and that way it's going to get all the surfaces. So slice it, cube it, And then when you put it into your marinade, it will actually, I'm going to do this. Put it inside this little container so I can still use my, there. And I wouldn't want to break them up. I just need to put the rest of the marinade on and it'll be full. And that's perfect way to do it. Put a snap lid on and it's good to go. And of course you can marinate the whole strips too, depending on the end result. So notice here that I marinated this in the squares. They cook really nicely that way. But if you want to get that caramelization on more surface area, you might as well do the cubes because it works out great. Since I'm tight for space, I'll leave it like this, but make sure you do layer them flat, and then you can really press them into the marinade. Okay, so let's check on our beautiful scramble. I think it's ready. All right, there it is. Oh yeah, that looks so pretty. All right, let's drop it in. And then we will add it to our beautiful Buddha bowl. So it has a little bit of the marinade, remember, just from the dregs in the pan. But I love how pretty and brown it is. And again, that's the trick. I think just getting a nice texture, hot skillet, and then using this that has a little bit of sweetness definitely added to the color. So now let's do our build. So here is our beautiful Buddha bowl. Now, of course, I could also add a little bit of spaghetti squash if I wanted to. I've got some roasted potatoes that I can add, so we'll get to nibble on that when we build this. And our completed broccoli. Let's see, where are my tongs? Yeah, so I don't handle it so much. Put it off to the side. I'm even going to chop some of these because, you know, you want to be able to get a nice bite of that wonderful tender broccolini. Put a couple of the edges in there. Make sure you can see all the pretty colors from the outside. And then here comes our variations of the tofu and the tempeh. So I'm going to cut them on the angle. So when you get to sample, I want to make sure you get a little bit of everything. So the one that's on the corner here, on the edge with the sesame seeds, is the one we call the bacon. Okay, and then this one is the soft tofu. So I want you to see the difference. It's the same marinade, but of course the texture is so different when it's tofu versus tempeh. I'm going to put that one, I think, right over here on the top of my beautiful greens. And we've got two more to sample. It's tender on the inside and crispy on the outside. And last but not least, oh no, I have so many for us to try, right? And this one. So I'll make sure you all get a sample of each of them. And hopefully mine's better than the store-bought buffalo one. But if you like that one better, don't tell me. Okay, so last but not least, a little bit of this one. And there we have it, a Buddha bowl with tempeh. All right, so bon appetit.